Welcome Wargamers, Doug here from 2 Plus Tough, and today I want to talk about one of the newest units to hit Conquest, the Last Arguments of Kings, or First Blood, depending on which version you are playing. That is the Centaur Avatara for the Spires. The Centaur Avatara are like a very heavy, fast cavalry unit, meant to really be like clearing out mass troops, things like that, lightly armored targets, and they fit a very niche role within the army. Now what I'm going to do with this review is talk about the model kit itself that Bellum was kind enough to send to me, and then we're going to shift over to talking about it as a unit within the game. We're going to review the rules, go to the shared screen and talk about all the special abilities it has, and just kind of get a fuller picture as to what this unit brings to the game. So on the topic of the actual kit itself, one thing you'll notice is this uses a lot of the newer plastics that Bellum has been using, which means a few things. One, it's incredibly detailed, nice, crisp corners, almost no mold lines across the entire sprue. Of course, you get your sprues for your miniatures, a instruction manual, which they didn't used to do. Usually you had to go online for the PDF, but there is an instruction guide here. One thing also to note is that all of the pieces now are numbered with little arrows telling you exactly which piece that number corresponds to. That is a step up from many other game model manufacturers, which I appreciate. Now, I mentioned before that I think Bellum has some of the highest quality miniatures on the market. I really do like some of their unique designs. This does not disappoint in that regard. One thing I will tell you though is that you are in for a scavenger hunt, because even though there's 3 models in the box, the bits for those are spread across multiple sprues. So there is a little bit of a scavenger hunt for you. That being said, like I said, there's only 3 models in the actual regiment itself. So, you know, kind of weigh that if you will. I found it to be a little bit like, well, where the heck is, but once you kind of got into the rhythm of what you were looking for, it goes by pretty fast. Here's the finished product, standing next to a Chaos Warrior from Games Workshop, so you can get a size comparison. As you can see, it is a big, chunky model. Now, one thing that I was worried about, because they do have sort of this like spear tip arm, or like a lance type arm, was that it was going to be very breakable. But because of the sheer scale of the miniatures and the thickness and strength of the plastics, you know, I've held it up by that arm and kind of whipped it around. It's never really shown any signs of bending or breaking, so it's a nice, sturdy model. Honestly, yeah, if you take a look at some of the older stuff from Bellum, their quality of manufacturing has just grown exponentially since the launch of their game, and this is no different. But what I'd like to do now is move over to talk about the actual unit itself as far as a gameplay thing. And I want to interject here right in the center of the video as we're transferring. If you like this unit and you'd like to save some money on any of your Conquest purchases, I do have an affiliate link in the description down below. It'll save you 10% on anything that you buy and go a long way to supporting me as a content creator and lets me know that you want more Conquest stuff. So let's go over the shared screen. We'll see what these guys can do. And here we are on the shared screen. We're taking a look at the Last Argument of Kings Army Builder, and this is just a format where we can take a look at all of the special rules that every unit has. Now, one thing that's very important for Conquest that is different from many other miniature games is that you only have access to units that your leaders can take. So you choose your heroes first, and then they will unlock access to certain units. Now, the only unit that I could find as of this exact moment that has access to the Centaur Avatara is going to be your Lineage Highborn. This is essentially one of your heroes has put their brain into a giant automata kind of a thing and projected their will onto the battlefield this way. And so they have with them a whole menagerie of crazy constructs and weird monsters to go along with them. These tend to be very elite heroes. I mean, their mainstay is the Avatara itself, which is another 3-man large unit that can be absolute wrecking balls if left kind of unmolested on the table. Restricted, meaning you have to take at least 1 unit of Avatara to be able to access the Centaur Avatara, means that these guys, they're pretty niche, right? If you're building a warband or army that is centered around very like low model count, high toughness units, that's when these guys are going to really shine. So I do kind of wish that there were more ways to get these into armies. So right now, to have a Centaur Avatara, you have to have Lineage Highborn, and at least one unit of Avatara, which honestly, if you like those models, is not a big ask, right? You're going to want those anyway. This is just giving that kind of specialized, heavy-hitting, low model count army some kind of cavalry punch. And so with, the prerequisites to bringing them out of the way, let's talk about the actual unit itself. So Centaur Avatara, they clock in at 165 points for 3 of them, which is exactly what you get in the box. They are a cavalry type, which is fantastic. They're going to be doing impact hits. Their class is heavy, which typically I look at heavy units with a very discerning eye because they come in later in the game. But what's interesting is that Spire heavy units tend to be pretty good because they're fast, meaning they come onto the board, yes, but depending on where your reinforcement line is or how fast the actual speed of the unit is itself, they can actually make a meaningful impact late game by getting straight into the thick of it. They have a movement value of 8, so that's pretty great. I mean, as far as like a cavalry unit, certainly for something heavy, you want them to be able to get up the board very, very quickly. They have a volley of 2, but that doesn't really matter for them. A clash value of 3, so 1, 2s, and 3s are going to be hitting. That's great. 5 attacks each, which is pretty stellar. 5 wounds each, so they are nice and tanky. A resolve of 4 and a defense of 4. Defense again is great, and evade of 1. So they do have some ways of mitigating damage. This is a late game meat wall that just waltzes onto the board with a bit more speed than your average infantry unit. As far as special rules, we'll click on these to examine them. Brutal Impact, and they, as noticed here, they have Brutal Impact 2. Enemy regiments suffer a penalty to their defense against impact hits caused with this special rule equal to the rule's attribute. So you're going to suffer -2 defense from the impact hits. Impact hits are going to be very important for these guys. Again, they do have 5 attacks each, but that turn that they charge, it's going to be 5 attacks plus the impact hits, and that's terrific. They have Resist Decay, which is interesting in terms of the Spire specifically. So if you're not familiar with how the Spire as an army operate, they have a lot of rules that involve decay, meaning you take damage from being near them, or if you have the decay rule on you, you take damage. The trade-off usually is that they can give their own units decay, meaning it hurts them, in exchange for some buff. So maybe it's you get better at attacking, but you take a little bit of damage at the end of the round kind of a thing. What this is essentially doing is allowing you to mitigate some of the damage that they will take from those buffs. You see this on a lot of the more elite units within the Spire infantry, and also like cavalry beasts, all that kind of stuff. They are allowed to take those buffs with less damage being received. So that's pretty great as far as like your synergies and stuff go. It's really going to matter more when you get into having other heroes like a Biomancer or something like that in your list. So that's important to know, but it is a nice little addition that they have. And finally, Shield, +1 to their defense against all hit rolls from the regiment's front arc. So your defense 4 becomes a defense 5. That is quite terrific. And for those of you who are new to Conquest and it's a little bit confusing, your value here is whatever you're trying to roll equal to or below. So that means on a d6 in the front arc, you just need to roll a 1, like 6 is the only thing that's bad, which is terrific. I mean, that is like some of the best rolling that you can do. Again, the minimum size is 3. If you want to add any more of the Centaur Avatara, they're 55 points, and you just add those stands individually from there. As far as options go, they do have a typical standard bearer, and a standard bearer, it's pretty much the same across every single unit. A regiment with a standard banner carries the Unstoppable special rule and adds 1 to its march distance, not the march characteristic, on the second march action it performs, which is fantastic because, like I said, they're a heavy unit. They're coming in later in the game, and so when they do that march to walk on the board and then that second march, they are getting a little bit of a boost from that, again, compounding their already speediness when compared to infantry. And as far as Unstoppable, you can re-roll failed charge rolls, which is quite important for a cavalry unit that wants to charge and charge and charge all over the place. Now, there's a few things about this that really stand out to me. One, they don't have any way of negating your enemy's defense outside of the impact, right? Brutal impact is the way that you kind of address heavily armored opponents, but it only does stuff on the charge, right? Those impact hits. We need to talk about just if you get stuck in, these guys do a lot less damage, which is pretty typical of, I guess, wargaming in general. When you talk about cavalry units with lances, typically they do exceptional on the charge, but they don't like to be stuck in. And this is no different. Because they are heavy and because they are a cavalry unit that wants to be charging, I really see the Centaur Avatara as your mid to late game way of clearing off objectives, but like specifically against infantry units. If you were to take these guys and charge them into a block of, say, hold warriors from the Dweghome, that initial charge is going to be devastating. Absolutely devastating. Now, do they want to get into a prolonged fight against something with a good defense value? No, not at all. But in terms of coming on late and just going straight as a beeline to an objective, they do that role quite well. And they do it in such a way that it doesn't really step on the toes of anything else. For example, your list, you have to have a Lineage Highborn and a unit of Avatara to even unlock these guys as an option. That's quite a bit of points. So your late game, maybe your Avatara are dead, maybe even the Lineage Highborn is dead, it doesn't really matter. These guys are going to roll up on the board, they're going to identify what is the most important thing when it comes to the scenario. How do we win this game? And then you're going to throw these guys straight at it like an arrow. Hopefully they get their charge off, which you're going to be re-rolling because I highly recommend you take a standard bearer, and they're going to get straight into the thick of it. Now the great thing is, once they get there, either to an objective that's unclaimed or they clear off some chaff from another objective that your opponent holds, these guys become the pain in the butt to shift, which is what makes them so valuable late game, right? Once all the heavies start coming in, it's time to start claiming some objectives and just holding them, because that means we're getting later and later into the actual game itself. So to be able to rock up onto an objective with defense 5 in the front arc and 5 wounds each, that's terrific. Like, that is absolutely terrific. And the fact that they're still moving 8, 9 if it's the second move action, they're just wonderful at rushing up, claiming something, and holding it for themselves. Whereas I look at other units like the Avatara, the one that is at least going to always be with them, they're going to be a bit more effective at clearing out medium to heavy infantry throughout the entire game, but they're not as speedy, they don't have shield, and so your ability to just plant on an objective and hold it indefinitely is slightly more limited to them, and you kind of, that trade-off is for more killing power. Whereas these guys, they want to rush in, they want to smash an enemy unit off an objective, preferably infantry or something like that, and they just want to take and hold. And when you start stacking some of the buffs that the other Spire spells and artifacts and that kind of stuff can really crank these guys up, yeah, you can get them to be a point where they are scary, in melee. I think those buffs are probably better spent on the Avatara themselves, simply because they already have, like, Cleave 1. But these guys do fulfill a role when it comes to being super aggressive and claiming late game objectives and stealing them away, like, at the very last second. So friends, I hope that you enjoyed that review. Thank you so much to Bellum for sending these guys out. They are an absolute joy to build. I love the models. Like I said, the finding the pieces was the hardest part, but what I basically did was just clip them all out and put them into piles. But once they're all out, they snap together very, very quickly and cleanly. No problems whatsoever with mold lines, anything like that. Love the plastics that they use over at PB. As far as a unit goes, they are very niche. Like I said, you have to take a Lineage Highborn and at least one unit of Avatara to be even able to field them. That being said, they complement those other units very, very well. They are a cavalry option. If you want to do a very elite Spires Army, boom, this is the way to do it. Being able to clear off larger units with buckets of attacks if they're light, or a devastating charge if they're like a medium option, is invaluable. So they do quite a bit on the tabletop and add to that specific kind of synergy list. And I think they have a cool place, and if nothing else, they're just really freaking cool models. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know if you like it and you want to see more like it for other units. I'll catch you later. Happy wargaming.